you want to save money on your trading card purchases, we have a promo link over at 50cards.shop. Enter the promo code ATNIGHT to get 5% off your order. Hey everybody, welcome to Nexus at Night, your weekly Vanguard podcast. I'm Atlas.
I'm Matt.
I'm Root Beer.
And today we are talking about triggers, both the heal triggers that were revealed this week, and as well as the concept of concept of triggers and whether it would affect deck building if you weren't required to run them at exactly 16. Before we started, though, I wanted to try this out at the beginning. Thank you to the patrons, the $10 patrons, Darren, Cole, Josh, Jeremy, GR, and Ali, who's a new patron.
Nice.
Yeah,
Welcome.
Got a new $10 patron. Thanks, Ali, for
Also,
showing
Matt,
up.
you sound kind of
If
distant
you want,
right now.
I seem
I
distant.
sound distant.
No, Matt
let
does.
me adjust my settings because I think it might have.
Well, like a '90s phone or something.
Nah, he just sounds like he's talking from the headset mic that's far away from his mouth.
Testing.
Oh, because he flipped it up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hey, much better. That is a lot better. Right. Always a good time.
But for reasons unknown,
Yeah.
I never touch it, and sometimes it's like, how about a different audio input?
Yeah, that always happens to me with the camera. If I have a different camera plugged in, it's like, hey, you want to be this one? And I'm like, no, never. Thanks.
Oh yeah, mine pulls from the first party software, so I never have to worry about it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. If I have a camera and I'm filming something like over there,
Oh
I'll be like first party camera. Yeah. So starting off here, to those who haven't been paying attention in Overdress, they have been slowly introducing heal triggers with other effects to gain shield when they guard.
They have been trying. Yes, that's true.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have the third one of these now. I believe we talked about the other two on past episodes, but starting off here, Stealth Fiend Tamara Hime for Dragon Empire. When it's put on guard circle, if your Vanguard's grade is lower than your opponent's Vanguard's grade, this gets plus 10k shield till end of battle, and then as you can see there, it's got 10k shield to begin with. So it caps out at 20.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we think?
I really hate these cards because oftentimes, they're just 10k shields. So other than they're not really supporting grade 4 decks anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of the decks they're printing, or all the decks they're printing are grade 3 decks, which means these only matter for a couple turns of the game that they're 20k. And then they're just worse than regular heals. And the decrease from 15 to 10 on a lot of a lot of guarding situations is really important.
It is, yeah.
Having a 15k block rather than 10k block is huge.
There's a reason why, even with the 25k heals, people only run one of each.
Yeah, because they're just worse most of the time.
You would rather have the consistency than the random situation where if it swung twice this turn, it gets becomes 25k shield or whatever the other one was.
And what's frustrating is if it were 10 then plus 15 rather than plus 10, so 10 plus 15, people would probably be more willing to try these things.
Yeah,
because they'd be 25 is actually a large number, and that could be quite a difference maker.
It would also be good for going second, where just if they are bigger, if they're a bigger grade than you, then it's just enough shield early in the game where that's a 1-card guard,
right?
And they just didn't.
The difference from 15 to 20 is smaller than 10 to 15 in most aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And as far as what just commonly comes up, basically. But 20k, if it were 15 plus 5, I mean, people would run them because they'd be strictly better, which is not a problem.
Yes.
But it at least makes them feel less bad most of the time, instead of just being bad and then being meh when they work. Yeah. Which is the worst case scenario.
So I did talk about this on our Twitter account. My comment was actual garbage. Why are these 10k? why do they only go up to 20? So against grade 3 decks, like you said, it only works half the time, and you're just gambling on a dice roll. If you win the dice roll, these don't even do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other option is like grade 4 decks. Most of the grade 4s have fallen off now. Like, you still play Mahar because it's better than crossover still, but I assume that will eventually maybe change. And either way, they're not supporting it. Bruce has already been dropping the grade 3 for a little bit anyways. Like, there are a lot of variant builds now, and now they're getting a new grade 3, so that's probably just gone. Magnolia hadn't been played in a while because of the Inlet Pulse ban, so that didn't matter up until recently. It might be relevant again after the unban, but
I just played it at locals this weekend against like Youthberg and an Ava deck and all this sort of stuff. And if you want to find more about that, patreon.com/Nexus at night. But for the most part, it's just kind of like, it wasn't like letting Anger Blader back in. If you remember that episode from a long time ago, where it's like, all right, suddenly I'm, about equal with everybody. It's got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah. Also, like, something I want to note is that Mahar and Bruce are both perfectly capable of breaking 33 fairly easily.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Magnolia, I think not as much when I was playing against you. I feel like you were often at like 31, so that is one matchup where it's like somewhat relevant. Prison, they still are on the grade 4, but also those numbers easily break 33. So again, it's like,
Bastion also can probably break
Bastion
33.
breaks 33 without even being at grade 4.
Yeah, without breaking a sweat. But Bastion has fallen off in terms of usage.
Yeah,
you're probably
like Bastion,
not going to run into it very much.
Yeah, like Bastion has fallen off, and like they are designing cards that favor you playing grade 3. I think in Bastion's case, you just both, like whichever happens.
Yeah,
and then Kyrie has like fallen off in usage.
Yep.
One of our friends started doing where he would like run the 4 Bastion grade 3 and then 2 grade 4, and he's like, if I see it, I see it, and if I don't, whatever.
And then the most obvious thing that this seems to be a direct response to are the Stride set lists. Chronojet is obviously like taken over the format. Mm-hmm. If we ignore Ebisu, which is not relevant to us in English, like Jet will just be the best deck going forward. They just revealed Amnesty Messiah recently, which is basically just the same as Fate Rider, but Messiahs.
Mm-hmm.
And so that deck, you have cards like Bailiff that gain 10k, and then you have the deck plays Brainwash Swirler to get power. Alongside the crest, most of the time, I think you can reach or exceed 33k without too much difficulty, just purely off of the crest and bouncing around like your Fate Rider buff. And so you're kind of in a situation where, like, even if you're playing against decks where this is relevant, like half of the time, 20k isn't enough to actually deal with it. Oh, and also this like does not work against Next Stage, because then you run into the problem of Next Stage de-strides, but also Jet has a glory skill that stops you from using the grade 1 perfect guards. So if you don't have Sanctitude exactly, then you're going to have to like perfect guard Next Stage, and then this is a 10k shield because your opponent went back down to grade 3.
It's so cool.
Like, this trigger got worse the more I thought about it.
Lyrics_Mad on Twitter had the idea that, like, what if this thing got 5k shield for every grade your opponent was bigger than what you had? And I think that
does that matter? Is that ever more than 5?
Yeah, that doesn't matter. It would have to be like higher base. It would have to like start at 15 or be like even higher base power at that point,
or start doing 10. Right? That'd be kind of neat.
Because sorry, go ahead.
Even to gain 10, like it would still have to be 15k base to be worth it. Like it has, like I think these just have to be bigger than 20k to like deal with how powerful grade 4s were. Because like I think because of the crest, most Stride decks, which is probably the thing we will be concerned about going forward, will likely be able to break 33k pretty easily.
Bushiroad has been so concerned with power creep and stemming it specifically for Overdress. And the stride stuff is a big paradigm shift, and I think that they're going to be scrambling to deal with it.
The crest was so badly designed.
Mm-hmm. And I think that if they had been more willing to do defensive power creep, like Elementaria Sanctitude was such a good way to do that.
Thank you, good. Because, like, not only does it deal with like grade 4s, but it also bypasses a lot of guard restricts, which was not something you could really do in the, I guess, like Blitz orders, but not a lot of people play Blitz orders to begin with.
Mm-hmm. It's like so well designed, and they're like afraid of making mistakes that they made in the past. Of like, oh, they like the whole locking thing from late Geo, where like, okay, I make you lock from hand, and then I make this deck that allows you to bypass locks by putting it into soul and then calling it back out again. Okay, well then I will make you put locks during battle phase or whatever. Like it becomes a weird arms race, and I think they're afraid of doing that again. But
I mean, they are doing it again. How many cards in set 8 bypass resist for no reason?
It's hard out here for a pimp. Like, so I'm not really sure what it is you could do in terms of like, what do you do after the crest thing? Because
like the crest just seems really hard to deal with because like banning it obviously doesn't work. They still need some way. Like it's part of a constructed set, so that's just hard to deal with to begin with. And then they can't ban it because that would dramatically change how the stride decks perform, and I don't think they want to completely just annihilate the concept because they need to sell products.
Yeah, there's like a weird thing with fans where they're like, ban it immediately. I'm like, let it have its moment.
No, I mean, like, the only, like, viable solution is probably trying to errata the crest, and that's messy, too, because you're just gonna have this crest inside the box that does not do what it says it does.
Mm-hmm. Like the Overtrigger that we've been telling them to ban for years.
Oh, they're not going to
over
do
a year.
Yeah, like, they'll never do it. We'll just keep saying it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if we're annoying enough, eventually we can just, like, bug them into, like, doing something.
Nexus at Night, the annoying podcast. Confetti.
Hell yeah. Finally, yeah. Something true.
Yeah.
But yeah. I know, like, one of the comments, like, they should... saying that they shouldn't just be, like, strictly better heal triggers, and I'm like, honestly, yes, they should. Like, the higher grade restriction is already, like, narrow enough. Like, even the old counter heals are honestly, like, incredibly narrow in how they apply. Like, they could honestly just be, like, strictly better heal triggers. It would make them more annoying to get your hands on, so from, like, an economy perspective, that would really suck, but from a gameplay standpoint, I don't see much that's to be lost in a format where defensive power is much needed.
The way you get around that is by reprinting them often. Like every other set, maybe.
Yes.
But,
people are like weirdly against this concept for some reason, but things like the one card PGs, honestly, they need to reprint Sanctitude. Like the effect triggers, they just reprinted them. They should reprint them again by like set 10.
Yeah. They're constantly.
There just needs to be like 5 different versions of these cards available at all times because they're just like strict upgrades.
Yeah, they're constantly like throwing pack filler in. Like there's goddamn bugs for Stoichea where like, if you have my friend, we both get 10k. Yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean,
they introduced a series of grade 1s in set 7 that all they do is when your opponent is at grade 3, get plus 5k. Those cards don't need to exist. You could have just replaced them with like a trigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like reprinting the triggers. Like it may be boring, but it's good for people to like get into your game or just like make multiple decks like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There are people like that where like I have a deck for every deck or ride line in this nation. I'm like, you're weird, but also cool. Have fun.
I mean, I almost have that with Dragon Empire. If Dragonic Overlord wasn't, like, fuck expensive, I'd have it.
I thought you were going to say that about Lyrical.
No, because I gave you Mediel, and I, like, don't play... I don't play a lot of the ride lines from set 1.
That's right. Well, if you want to see the ride lines go head to head, we have series 2 of Triangle Meta dropping this week. I think the second one comes out today when you hear this. So, yay, fun stuff. Was there anything else we wanted to say about these mistakes of heel traders?
Yeah.
Go for
somebody actually brought this up this morning because somebody saw the post, I guess, on Twitter or something, and people were talking about it. And it's kind of like, if the goal of these heel triggers is to equalize the difference from going first or second, where going first is quite powerful, then just do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
These heel triggers don't actually change that dynamic at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just sometimes worse eventually. But if you're gonna remember in V we had this problem for a while too.
Yeah.
And they made some minor changes to try to address that, which maybe did not matter. Of the quick shield.
Yeah.
Which
and
wasn't
eventually
the whole time.
Heel Guardians too.
Right, and Heel Guardians were quite successful, right?
Yeah.
They were a little less shield, but you got guaranteed effects for quite a while.
And
Instead of sorry, go ahead.
The effects that you would get are much more impactful than just plus 10k shield, right?
Correct.
You either have extra power, which lasts the whole turn and can dramatically stop, or what am I trying to say? It can stave off an offensive push much more effectively than just 10k for a little bit. And then crit -2 in a lot of cases just says negate a damage.
The other thing was they allowed you to be self-damagers. That comes up a lot less often, but it is a thing you can do, and that did come up during regionals for me.
Yeah, it makes damage denying keeping on 0 damage not really worth it. But 1 damage, you might be able to be yeah, maybe.
And it does make you say
just keep it 0.
Yeah, and even then, if you have 1 damage, you can't be all right, I've used a counterblast, call this, get another. It's not like that.
Yeah.
It has to be exactly 0. I think Heel Guardians were incredibly well designed.
Yes. And, I think I saw Outer Orange talking about how they could have future potential, because obviously they're making more stride lists, and there's the potential for things like Superior Ride, which don't make Superior Rides in D, thank you.
Youth Perk, kind of.
I mean, she's just riding another grade 3. That's it's basically just a restander.
From hand, do you mean from deck or something like that, or where's the line for you?
I'm just don't let people ride up early. Don't let my opponent be at grade 3 when I'm at grade 1.
Got it. Cool.
This has been a problem since set 5 of original Vanguard. Barkall was banned forever because they were.
We have a whole video explaining it. Go watch it on the rest of the channel.
Yes. So bringing up future mechanics that might make these relevant. So I'm just okay, half of these mechanics probably just shouldn't exist in the format, and the other half is currently dominating the game. So I feel we already have. I feel the other problem that this is trying to address is just maybe these just shouldn't be there, but also I don't know how you deal with strides, because they already made the Chronojet list.
Yeah. I don't know, to be honest. I kind of I know they're good and everything, but I don't hate the concept of stride. And I remember in early G era, you weren't here yet, right?
No, I joined set 7.
Were you here? Yeah, you were here. So do you remember stride coming out and people being pissed off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
People were pissed off that Legion was ending early. People were pissed off. People were pissed off about Legions and if that Legion was ending early. And they were pissed off about stride.
Yeah, that's true. Where they were I hate this thing, but it's leaving? Oh, fuck you.
Because there were some cool decks at the end of Legion, I think, that kind of changed people's tune on it. But the decks were a little I mean, the decks were kind of frustrating in some ways. So
Yeah.
it was kind of.
You want a restander or a guard restrict?
Yeah, it was one of
Prominent
those formats.
player.
It was one of those
Um,
formats.
I
Also,
quite
like-
enjoyed my Fox Legion,
Mhm.
even though it was a promo. I just wish they gave everything a fair shake instead of being like, all right, here's 6 clans and the rest of you get promos. We're out.
Yeah. Well, because like Legion ended in a year.
hmm And it was like 2 sets and that was it.
Yeah, we got 2 sets plus 2 extra boosters. I think Japan got like 2 or 3. I don't. No, we got 1 set. I think because they merged them, and then
That's
we
right.
got the extra boosters.
Yeah. It was.
I'll get to it eventually. The Legion video is going to be so weird because isn't this also around the time they finally introduced clan regulation?
Yeah, I think so.
Like I've always heard the mythical story of people just jamming together Thing Saver and Phantom Blaster Abyss. I don't know how true that is.
It was a thing for a little bit.
Yeah, it was only a really small amount of time.
Mhm.
Like people were trying to do more and more insane things, like playing like the Genesis draw that could soul charges, and like trying to do every possible like card, but like it was a mess.
Yeah.
It was mostly just like at some point it was basically just like just Blaster Dart, basically, or like just enough pieces
Yeah.
to get it done.
I'm just
I
trying to
can't wait
figure
when
out
you get there.
what was the breaking point where they were like, maybe clan fight should be like an actual rule of the game and not just something we enforce through like clan restrictions or lord.
Yeah, I think it's just something they thought would never really be exploited in that way, except like in set like 1-2, and then when it started happening again, other than like the stupid grade 1 rush decks, which never mattered, just being like, yeah, we should probably say something.
Yeah,
I don't think it's a huge deal.
Every rule has someone behind it, right?
Yeah.
So
Pretty much.
Also, the stupid tweet I wanted to send this morning was like a grade stall deck, but that doesn't actually work because Chronojet uses the current rules. So
yeah, so they can just do the thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, otherwise I would have posted some sort of stupid grade 2 stall Roroa deck with the caption, I solved Chronojet.
Good lord.
But I can't make the memes.
Every turn it draws you a card. All right. Well, why don't we move on then? Because so the other I guess thought experiment we're on here is Rapier. You remember this from
Yeah, so at the beginning of December, Changu made a tweet that was just like, if deck building wasn't subject to the 16 trigger rule, we still have the current like restrictions on crits and heals. Do you think people would run more or less triggers than 13?
Than 16.
Or than 16, yeah. Sorry.
So I think there are some formats, or there are some decks that might choose to run less in premium, specifically.
Yeah,
okay.
But it wouldn't be very many, probably, and it wouldn't be like it would mostly be to like fit a card or something. Because there's definitely times when I've been building like, I don't know, spikes or something, and I'm just like, I would like to have one more deck slot.
Yeah.
And the triggers and spikes were not terribly important.
Mm.
So like I could feasibly see scenarios where in premium specifically, where checking triggers for the most part matters a little less, especially in like kind of an aggressive deck like Spike Brothers, where you're kind of like putting all in, right? But in D, there's no shot. None.
It's gotta be the 16 with your.
It's got to be the 16 or more.
Yeah.
Or more. Yeah, probably.
Like I would almost certainly be running more because you only have like the 3 Persona rides main deck and then you have the one in your ride deck. There have been times where I'm building and I'm like 1 or 2 cards short just because of those like ride deck slots that aren't there anymore. And I
could feasibly see decks in D that run like 22 crits.
Yeah. Well, they would have the current crit rule still, so they'd up to 8.
Sure.
But yeah, like there are plenty of decks where I'm like, oh, I have like 1 or 2 flex spots. Let's just throw in front trigger so I have extra shield.
Mm-hmm.
And those front triggers with extra shield are really nice.
I think especially if they just drop this rule on us, they would you would see people being like, all right, just a little bit, right? Just add a couple more triggers.
Someone is going to make some sort of stupid glass cannon deck that has like 30 triggers in it.
Yeah.
It'd be funny.
Or, well, it'd probably be some sort of Grand Blue variant, right?
Yeah.
Get the appropriate things in drop zone and then go ham from there. What I would also think is if this was from the beginning, where it would be like, I don't know, Yu-Gi-Oh's extra deck, maybe, where it just tops out at this amount. You could see people doing decks differently, or if it was just like, all right, you can have up to 49, just your starter has to be not a trigger or whatever. From the start, you would see it would like affect people's way of looking at deck.
No, there were trigger
differently.
forerunners.
That's true. Yeah, from your fucking video with
Like Battle Riser.
Battle Riser.
Yeah. And the heal, was there a couple of heal trigger ones, or just Magus?
Sphere Magus was also one.
Fair enough.
That was one of those things where, as I was saying it, I was like, I'm wrong. The thing I'm saying is wrong.
Yeah.
But you see what I'm getting at. We're like, it would affect the way people think, and like the brain chemistry from the get-go.
Yeah.
So.
And that I also had one other thing, because it's a conversation that has come up recently that is still on the topic of triggers, which is removing the current trigger restrictions in D, which is that only 8 draws, only 8 crits.
Okay.
Like, people have been discussing, like, whether or not that should happen. What do you guys think?
Only 8 draws, only 8 crits.
Yeah, that's the current restriction right now.
Yeah,
so if they were to lift that and you're allowed to run, like, 12 crits if you wanted to, like, how would that affect the game? Because
I think they should allow people to run, like, whatever.
Because I know initially the reason that got implemented in the first place was during set 3, we saw the third wave of criticals coming out, and a lot of people were against it because at that time, Bruce and Bastion were the clear best decks, and people were afraid that, like, if you could just jam 12 crit in the deck, everyone would do it, and then you would have that much more margin over everything else. And then, afterwards, we got, like, grade 4s and Gravidia, and I feel like the topic never came up because it's just like, do you want to give those decks 12 crit?
I wouldn't want to give it to Gravidia, that's for sure.
And so now that those cards have kind of died down a bit, I think people are now revisiting the idea again.
I think give it a little more time. If you're thinking of undoing it, maybe 1 or 2 more sets. If you keep it in place, I wouldn't hate it. That's all I'll say.
See, I feel like if they were going to, it would have happened. They probably would have had to do it already, because I feel like going forward, we're going to have a lot more restanding vanguards.
Yeah, probably.
We're like, Dote is relevant. We're going to have Next Stage, which doesn't keep the criticals between attacks, but you still get like 5 drive checks. What's it called? We're getting Minerva. We already have Lutetia. Am I forgetting any other like random restanding vanguards right now?
Grade 4 Eugene. I don't.
Grade 4 Bruce. Eugene has a restander.
I know.
Has a way to restand himself. I mean.
Okay, but funnier if there was a grade 4 Eugene somehow.
Yeah, I mean, okay, this is my bold prediction, but like the Dragon Tree that's on Dragon Tree Invasion, which is set 9, I'm predicting that will either be or become a grade 4 if they're like prepping for grade 4 counters already with the heals.
I hope not.
I mean, they seem to be moving away from it, but also they keep making strides, right?
Right. I'm not really sure how this is going to shake out. I love the idea of maybe God, the original BT09 was terrible. I'm sorry. I was thinking about like, are all the like set 9s shit? Because GBT09 was terrible. BT09 was terrible with like the
BT09 was the blood, right?
Yeah, it was the blood, and it was the Ezel redo that was just like oof.
Right? The blood was good. Glory Maelstrom didn't do anything. It had Chrome Jailer.
Oh, it had the Amaterasu cross ride.
Yeah.
I think the best card in the set, at least like after a long period of time, was actually Metatron. And that card was not good.
VBT09 was Butterfly to Moonlight, which was the
That
Night
one was
Rose,
good.
Harry.
Yeah,
that one was
good.
okay.
That was good.
All right,
Yeah.
so V gets a pass here. I was just wondering
Yeah.
if it was
Yeah, the original
everybody.
BTO9. I like Magatsu Storm, but he sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The blood was relevant. I think Dragonic
Kinda.
Kaiser was meta.
We were
Yeah, it was
around
relevant. It was relevant for about
5
2
seconds.
weeks, and then
Yeah.
Bermuda Break Ride came out.
Yeah. And the
That-
funny
that-
thing
that
is,
was
like,
that.
we got the Bermuda set before set 10, so in English that was our introduction to brake rides, but in
We got it
Japan they
before
got
the
the trial
TVs.
deck first, which is going to be a really funny story when I get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good bit.
All right,
No,
sorry.
there were relevant cards in BTO9.
Okay.
Blaster Blade Spirit and Blaster Dark Spirit.
But that wasn't even that relevant for that long. That was just kind of like
I mean, they did matter.
Yeah.
sort of. Blaster Blade
Also,
Spirit more
They
so than
mattered
Blaster
like
Dark.
past this point though. They mattered
Yeah.
like far later in the future when having a 10k base was nice.
Mhm,
Yeah.
definitely. And then also like the Liberator Dragon recently like runs Blaster Blade Spirit for stuff,
That's funny.
which is
That-
random, but sorry, I got off track.
Yeah. No, they run Blaster Blade Liberator. Spirit's a Royal Paladin. You can play it in golds.
No, was Blaster Blade Spirit not both?
Wait, is it? Let me see.
It's
I feel like the whole.
it says
Oh, yeah,
this is
you're right, it
also
is.
Gold Paladin.
Yeah, they're also
Yeah.
gold paladins. Never
Yeah.
mind. I am incorrect.
Sorry.
I was like, I'm pretty sure the whole point was that they were both.
Yeah. So anyway, Dragon Tree is Dragon Tree going to be a restander? It's a pretty good guess, I think.
No, I'm not saying if it's going to be a
Yeah.
restander. I'm saying it's going to be a grade 4.
Oh,
Somehow I doubt it. We haven't seen a grade 4 since Kyrie, right?
Yeah.
I
like,
feel like that they're afraid
Aside
to
from
do
strides,
that
which is
again.
cheating.
Yeah.
But also, like, the concept hasn't left D, right? Like, they're going to keep making stride sets as long as they sell. So, yeah, the fact that they're, like, prepping for having a higher grade makes me feel like the Dragon Tree, if it's not grade 4 now, might be in the future. Anyways,
Well,
I also didn't get to say my hot take about crits, which is that we should have less of them.
what's your cap then? 4?
Yep. Yeah, 4. Because I
Okay.
remember, like, during set 1, before they revealed the main set triggers, like, I was just running off the assumption that the 4 we had in the TD might be all. And that was, like, a really interesting time.
And then the set came
Because-
out, and he's like, "Here's another one," and you're like,
Yeah.
"All right."
Because, like, you had to rely more on just, like, the raw power of your deck. You couldn't just, like, oh, you're at 5 damage now from one attack. You know, it happened less often, and it felt like triggers didn't factor as much into, like, winning. They were still important, obviously, like, things like draws and fronts still add a lot of power, but you couldn't just suddenly take your opponent to, like, way higher damage than they were expecting as often.
So
It would make getting hit by a crit feel a lot worse, because they're like, oh, of course, one of the 4, but like, broadly speaking, I thought it made the game more engaging, and I think I've been on the, like, limit crits train since G, and I say this as an OTT player.
I'm kind of wondering what that would look like. Let's say from the beginning, crits were never a trigger. It was always an effect, right? Like gets critical +1, and they just stayed with stands and fronts and draws and
Mhm.
mills. Like, what would that look like? You think?
The game would be very different. Like,
Slow.
I think we always talk. The game would be a lot slower, yes, and I think Bushiro. Like, my conspiracy theory is the reason Bushiro keeps printing bad defensive cards. They don't want games to take forever.
They have said this multiple times. Yeah.
And, you know, this is also why you only have 4 heals in the deck, is because otherwise games will take forever.
This was a big thing they had in Weiss for a long time as well, is speeding up games, which is why they printed a lot of really insane, like, level 3 bosses at the end. Is that you could die from, like, level 2.
Yeah.
Is
So,
it
like-
a thing where they just kind of like players will use up the time they're given no matter what?
Yes. Have you seen the amount of people going into overtime?
Yes, but that you don't see that happening nearly as much in Yu-Gi-Oh, and I assume Magic, right?
So Bushiroad is not looking at this from any kind of competitive perspective. They're just saying, "Oh, casual games are taking too long. Let's make the game go faster." It's just that's what they want out of it, from a casual perspective. It has nothing to do with the competitive aspect of the game.
Yeah, they just don't like longer games, which I feel like we as players want games that are longer, that have better back and forth, and I feel like reducing the number of criticals would do that. It would make gaining a critical more impactful, and you wouldn't feel like you were robbed of a game because you were double crit on 3. Yes, I'm still salty about that.
Well, let's explore that question. Like, why do you want games to go longer? What is that? How does that benefit you? How does that, like, what does that say about the game that you've played?
I think it's the idea of having the back and forth. Like, the longer the game goes, the more of a competitive. I think people conflate that idea like a longer game is more competitive because you had more turns to go back and forth. I don't necessarily
You're
want
ultimately making more
plays,
decisions. Yes,
decisions. Okay.
Yeah.
So typically, this is kind of the reason why a lot of Magic players, like a lot of very good Magic players, will play like control or mid-range decks, is because those games give them more skill expression over a longer game, which is something they can leverage. In Vanguard, games being short means that you could just kind of just throwing whatever cards you have on the table. And you're just like, well, the triggers do what the triggers do.
I guess that's kind of the same, or like really any other game. Like, look at basketball, for example. For like a game where you want to like show how good you are. Like, let's say you have like a rivalry from the kid down the street. You want to play to like 11 or 21. If it's street ball or whatever, instead of like first one to 3 wins. Like, you don't really get to do all the things you'd want to do otherwise. Like, football has 4 quarters for a reason. They're not doing just the 1 quarter, because they want to show all of the, like, the coach over there with the whiteboard, like, all right, we're going to run a flea flicker or whatever. I'm doing this as somebody who got beat up by the football team, but for playing a game, any game, you want to show how good you are at that game on like a primal level, I think.
Yeah.
And that's true for a lot of things. Like, that's why, like, even like when people like want to compete in something, or like they want to like actually like put money down on something, it'll be over a long set.
Yeah,
it's not going to be just one game. Like, for example, a money match in a fighting game, no one's going to be like best of one, $200 each. No one wants to do that.
Best of 3, best of 5, whole tournament.
First to 10, typically.
First to 10. Oh, damn.
And playing a long set or doing something that takes like over a long period of time, whatever the game is going to have wildly drastic implications from game 1 to game 8. Because you now know a lot more about what your opponent's thinking about and what they're prioritizing.
It's a dance.
Yes. And I think that is very, very valuable in like these, and that's why these longer kind of things are quite respected and desired, is because like you actually get to this kind of like mind game level rather than just kind of playing the game that's like you see visually.
Yeah. So like I've been trying to get my locals to gentlemen out of the over trigger for a while now. Like, all right, at the beginning, just put it down, and then no OTs for standard.
Side out over trigger, side in the second over trigger.
that was the Yu-Gi-Oh guy, right? With the
I'm not sure if that ever actually happened. It probably did.
He claims that he never did it, but some of his teammates might have.
Yeah. It's a funny story regardless.
Yes.
No, I think it would just be a thing where like you physically.
I feel like if that happens to you, you just have to take the L. Like, you believed a Yu-Gi-Oh player, first of all.
Well, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think this is always a pretty interesting discussion.
Definitely.
I would like to see, like I said, I would like these heals to just be strictly better, honestly.
Yeah.
That's the only way that they're going to be any kind of reasonable to play. I think being 10k sometimes is just not good enough. And
I mean, 10k most of the time, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Combine all three of those effects together.
You can make it modular, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, they could just do that. Like, pick one of these effects.
If
But-
they attack twice, if they have an extra crit, or if they're higher grade.
Yeah.
Get
The extra crit is also like very restrictive because it doesn't count crit triggers.
Mhm.
As we see more strides come out in the future and more powerful offensive mechanics, I would like you to keep, you can always keep track of how willing on offense Bushiroad is willing to go while playing quite safe on defense.
Mhm.
Always willing, always a good thing to be like, what's going on there? I mean, I've like I said, I think Bushiroad has stated they don't want games to take a long time. Although that was a while ago, I assume nothing's changed. That was like back in like 2015 or something. But I just assume that philosophy has not changed. Again, they're looking at this game from a casual, play the game, have fun perspective.
Yeah.
People are going to competitive no matter what the thing is.
Correct. Look
Hate
at
to
Smash.
break it to you. Yeah.
Nintendo does everything in their power to destroy Smash, and yet Smash rises.
Yeah. And they're like, what if they have people faceplant regularly? They're like,
We just
go
won't
back
play
to
that
the
one.
other one. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
All
well, okay, that didn't work.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening to Nexus at Night. Like I said before, if you want to support the show, patreon.com/Nexus at Night. You get like extra bonus show with the three of us, occasionally a guest. And then thanks to the patrons that I said before at the beginning of the episode. How about the rest of us?
You can find me on Twitter at Wiggums. 2 G's, 2 Z's.
You can
Some
find
people
me
only
at
listen
Plasma
to it.
Eclipse.
Find me at Atlas Novak, Twitter or Instagram. Follow my other podcast at Generation Dan on Twitter, Generation_Dan on Instagram. Follow us at Nexus at Night on Twitter. And until next time, I was Atlas.
I'm Matt.
I'm Root Beer.
And have a good night, everybody.
Let's see